So we're meeting with the House Budget Committee chairman. And one of our members is a police chief, who I swear is from like Police Chief Central Casting. And the chief turns to the chairman and says, "Mr. Chairman, I arrested a young man for a crime recently, and I took his confession, and I laid it in front of him on the table and asked him to sign it. And he says, I won't." I said, "Why not?" The young man says, "I can't read or write." The chief leans into the chairman and says, "Mr. Chairman, I arrest people who commit crime. But once that crime is committed, it is too late. I can't prevent that crime from happening. I do my job. I need you to do your job. Invest in the programs that help young people get the right start in life." I'm David Cass. I'm the president of the Council for Strong America. Thank you all for coming today. So the Council for Strong America is made up of these 5 amazing constituencies, unexpected messengers, who educate policymakers about what really works to help get kids the right start in life. So we have 9,000 members, police chiefs and business leaders and retired admirals and generals, evangelical pastors, and athletes and coaches. So we don't run programs. What we do is we meet with policymakers, we do press conferences, we educate them about what really works. So there are 2 things I'm hoping to do in this panel today. So the first is to share with you that the strength of our very nation is dependent upon children being educated and healthy, and that our national security depends on it, the strength of our economy, that the strength of our family. All these things are dependent upon our kids getting what they need to get the right start in life. And then also, you're going to hear from this extraordinary panel about how law enforcement and business and these different constituencies are working on these issues. And then finally, to begin a dialogue of how do we partner with each of you? How can we work together to move these issues forward? So let me introduce the panel. First, we have retired Vice Admiral Nancy Brown, who is representing our national security group, which is called Mission Readiness, and has 700 retired admirals in general. And she retired from the Navy in 2009 after 35 years of service as a 3-star, and had served as the principal advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and many, many awards, including the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, Bronze Star, and was the first female admiral on the ground in the Iraq War. Michael Harper, who is a businessman who runs a state farm insurance agency in Portland, Oregon, and a former professional athlete as well, played for the Portland Trailblazers. And so he's representing our business leader group. It's called Ready Nation, and that has more than 2,000 business leaders around the country. And then our athletes and coaches group, which is Champions for America's Future. And then Chief Acevedo, the Houston police chief, who previously was the Austin police chief, a hometown favorite. And he's representing our anti-crime group, Fight Crime, Invest in Kids, which has 5,000 police chiefs, sheriffs, and prosecutors around the country. The chief runs a department with 5,200 sworn law enforcement officials and 1,200 civilian personnel as well. So we know so many young people, everybody in the audience, working on something important. And you all know that so many young people aren't doing well. We did a report a few months ago called the Citizen Readiness Index, and we looked at 3 basic questions of how are young people aged 17 to 24 doing. We asked, are they working, or are they in post-secondary education or training? Did they have a criminal record, or could they qualify for military service if they chose? And what we found is that it's shocking how few young people are able to meet those criteria. And that, in fact, 38 states got a grade of C or worse. And we also found that high-quality early childhood makes a huge difference in whether young people can get the right start or not. We'll shout out back there in the audience. Thank you. So let me turn to the audience, let me turn to the panel now to just talk about this. And Admiral, distinguished many years in the military, How did you get, you can talk about how did you get your start? That would be great.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for being here today to share in this panel discussion. I think it's a very important issue. When I look back, when I was 21 years old, I was unemployed. I had no prospects. I really didn't even know what I wanted to do. I had a college degree. You would think that lots of opportunities would have been out there for me, but I couldn't seem to find them. And so my father suggested that I look at the military. Well, I'm not even sure I knew what the military did, but he thought the Navy would be a good fit for me because they have the best food. So I made a life commitment decision based on the fact that somebody cooked well. I went to see the recruiter, and I joined the Navy. And I had the most wonderful career. It's a blessed career. I had challenges. I had adventures. I was witness to historic events. I was at the Pentagon on 9/11. I was in Iraq for the first ever free election. I participated in the aftermath of Katrina. I have more frequent flyer miles on Air Force One than I can count. I can't imagine any other profession giving me the challenges, the adventures that the Navy gave me. And that's why it's so distressing to me when I found out that 71% of our 18 to 24-year-olds are not eligible to join the military. That's because they can't pass the entrance exam, they are obese and can't pass the physical exam, or they have a criminal record. Now, I spent 35 years in the field of information technology, command and control, communications, and computers, and I've seen firsthand the complex systems that we expect our recruits to master. There's no room in our military today for someone who does not have a high school education. And the numbers of our personnel that have college level education is increasing every day. The amount, when you figure 7 out of 10 young people do not have the opportunity that I did, I think is a very alarming statistic. But the good news is this is a trend we can reverse if we work together. It's a proven fact that quality childcare and preschool education provides the foundation to develop young people that are ready to be productive citizens. If they want to join the military, they're eligible. If they want to take on a different profession, they're eligible. And that's what we have to focus on, is making those folks eligible to be productive citizens in this day and age. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. You know, there's the Department of Defense as a huge employer. Obviously, they're looking for qualified people just in the way that the private sector is. And there needs to be, what you're saying is early childhood can make such a difference there. Michael, you've had a fascinating career in sports and business. So just talk about your path and then what you've seen.
I guess I'm sort of in a unique position. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. 4 brothers and 3 sisters raised by my mom and dad. I race to the dinner table every night because if you missed that race, you didn't eat. I was fortunate to have a core group of family members that protected me. So as I went out on the street, we always knew to make sure that we were protected. But more importantly, sports is what got me out of that environment. The ability to play a sport and remember what they'd say, the coaches would say to me all the time, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Well, in 2018, kids aren't hearing that. I share with them as a current college basketball coach, I say hard work pays off. And I say that because what you put in, you get out. But the most amazing thing for me was after going through college, remembering my high school experience, having an incredible elementary school experience, I knew that after college, there was something else. And I knew that the ability to graduate from college was extremely important. Yes, I had the skills of basketball, but I went to a small Division III college. So there was no expectation I was going to be some superstar professional. But I had faith. But that faith came with knowing and having the dependence and interdependence that I received growing up. So as a value system, the college education was key to me to give me the opportunity to know what I was going to go, when I was going to go, and how I was going to go to the next level. It wasn't about sports. It was about education. After education was over, I had an opportunity to play basketball, travel around the world, but then it was over. I had to reach back to my education. Currently, after 28 years of State Farm Insurance and talking to customers and knowing how they feel and having the empathy and sympathy and the ability to talk to them through their dilemmas of life and the ability to manage their risk has been and is and currently always important to me. But the key was that post-secondary education, knowing that it wasn't enough just to finish high school. Knowing it's just not enough to go to college. It was understanding the steps and path after. So 1 in 8 today need to have an ability to know that 1 out of 8 kids, if they're not able to and have the ability to go on to college and go past there, that's the issue that I'm dealing with. At 16 and 19, not being engaged in understanding what post-secondary education is all about, but more importantly in the workforce. 28 years in business, knowing that there is going to be some steps that they're going to have to make, understanding that proper preparation does provide for a positive performance, but it starts at birth.
I mean, it really is a shocking statistic. 1 out of 8 young people are not either employed or in post-secondary education. I think you're making such an important point. Chief, talk about your...
I think I'm hot. Not physically or anything, just my mic's working. Thank you.
Would you talk about your career path and then
Sure.
what you're seeing with young people, because you're obviously working with them every day?
Well, I became a cop in 1986. I quit law school because being a Cuban immigrant, I really asked myself halfway through the first year, do we really need another lawyer in California? The answer was, no offense to lawyers, there was 150,000 of them. They really need them, and I want to give back to this great country that gave us the gift of freedom, which is the greatest gift anyone can receive. And so my very first duty station was East Los Angeles. I just turned 22. East Los Angeles is one of the most densely populated communities in the state of California, predominantly Hispanic, predominantly immigrant, and a large number of gangs. And it didn't take me very long to realize that there was a common denominator in terms of the people that I was dealing with that were involved in criminal activity. And that common denominator was they were high school dropouts. They didn't finish their education. Some of them were junior high school dropouts. And I started realizing early on that if I'm really truly going to impact public safety, it starts with investing in kids. And so even as a young officer, 4 years on the job, I got involved with the National Latino Peace Officers Association. We started giving away raising scholarship money for kids, toy giveaways, because no kid should wake up that knows that Santa Claus missed their home on Christmas Day. So we started giving toy giveaways every year. And to make a long story short, it became a passion for me, crime fighting. And crime fighting, not just being tough on crime, but being smart on crime, which means we get a lot more when we invest in the educational young people, especially pre-K education. I mean, how many of you are educators in this audience? Let's give our educators a hand. You're our heroes, really, truly are. I love educators, especially public educators. But think about 1969, I entered elementary school. The only non-English speaking kid in school at the time in El Monte, California, Norwood Elementary School. But kindergarten, when I came into kindergarten, was 8 to 12. You had milk and cookies, nap time, playground time. I got to hog the tricycle time because I didn't speak any English, and I go, "Okay," and so they let me hog the tricycle. It really worked well. You learned your colors, and maybe that's about it. Now move forward to my little boy, Jake, who's going to be 10 here in April. His kindergarten was not a half day, just milk and cookies. His kindergarten was reading, writing, science, math. You had to have a certain vocabulary getting in there, and he was one of the blessed kids that hit the ground running. Now, imagine these kids that, through no fault of their own, are born into circumstances economically that can't afford a quality pre-K education. They enter school behind. Every summer, and they fall further behind because while the haves are in enrichment programs, they're out in camps and so on, they keep falling behind. They end up dropping out of school, and guess what happens? 70% of the people in prison, they're there because they didn't finish their education, and that ends up spiraling out of control. So I'm here fighting, educating people to invest in the public safety, economic vibrancy, and national security of our country by investing in children.
Thank you. Well, you talked about the science, and we know from the science what a difference that the beginnings of life make. And what I want to do is share 5 numbers with you, thanks to our friends at the Center for the Developing Child at Harvard. So the first one is a big one, the million. So that's the number of synapses that are formed every single second in a child's brain for the first 5 years of life. So 1 million. The second number is 18 months. At 18 months, we start seeing differences in the vocabulary between richer kids and poor kids. So that by age 3, that kids of parents, of college-educated parents, they have 2 to 3 times the vocabulary of kids whose parents didn't complete high school. And by age 3, those poor kids have 30 million fewer words that they've heard in their lifetime. So the third number is between 90 and 100%. So those are the chances. If you grew up with poverty or child abuse, those are the odds that you had what we call an adverse childhood experience, that you will have a developmental delay. The fourth number is 3 to 1. You're 3 times more likely to have heart disease later on if you've had 6 or 7 of these adverse experiences. So it actually affects your very physical health. And then the last number is 4 to 9. So for every dollar invested in high quality early childhood, we get a return of between $4 and $9. Why? Because we spend less on special education. We spend less on crime. And the kids are more likely to grow up and get a job, and then money going back in to the government rather than needing services. But I think that really shows us that the science is so clear on this, that these investments in early childhood are so critical. So, Chief, maybe we can start with you. I'm curious, so we know that what they call the socio-emotional learning, that these are so critical. Can you just talk about what you see in your day job and why you're here today about early childhood and why this is so important?
We know emotional intelligence, I think, is key to success in school, right? I mean, being able to interact with other folks in a peaceful manner, being able to deal with your frustration in an intelligent manner. And what happens is by the time you're in kindergarten, 5, 6 years old, your personality is already pretty much set. And unfortunately, those impulse control that we are taught, those skills that we are taught, and hopefully by responsible adults around us, too many of the kids nowadays that don't get that solid foundation that people always, hey, why is the police chief writing an op-ed piece supporting the governor of the state of Texas when he wanted to add $120 million 2 sessions ago into pre-K education? Well, this is why, because it's in that pre-K education where you are getting to learn those how to control those impulses. And sadly, when you add a inability to control impulses because you were never properly taught at an early age and you develop really bad habits, now you add the proliferation of firearms in our country, and now you add the fact that because you entered school behind, fell further behind, didn't have the emotional intelligence and or sophistication or the tools that you needed to be successful, you end up dropping out, then you get involved in crime, then you get a firearm, and guess how many of these young people in the city of Houston at 16, 15, can't control their impulse. Next thing they shoot somebody, they kill somebody, and now we've lost somebody from society that we have to deal with and pay a much higher cost. Think about how much we paid to educate a kid per year and how much we paid to incarcerate a kid for life. And so we can pay a little now to provide them those tools, including the tools on how to deal with your emotions and your impulses, or we can pay 10, 20 times more dollars in the back end.
Thank you. Michael, I know you mentor kids, and I'm just curious what you see with the kids you work with, and also just what are the skills that you see that are necessary in business to be successful?
Well, in business, we have a selfish purpose. We want to make sure that we have an incredible workforce to take us to the next level. The three issues that we deal with is, first of all, the soft skills that are learned not at pre-K, but at birth. Number one is critical thinking. How is this child going to be able to communicate? Number two, it is communication, to be able to share your ideas or even share your feelings of what's happening to you and how you're doing. And number three, collaboration, who you're willing to work with and how you work with people. Because success in business is a collaboration. It is about critical thinking, and it is about communication, because we want not only the things that you see here in regards to innovation, but we want success based upon future technology, future engineering, future science, and future math. And we need those kids at birth and within the family to be a part of it. So it may take that mom or dad for us to make that investment in what they're doing in the household. Maybe it's a part of us being involved with sharing that it's important that all children have access to medical and health care. Maybe it's possible that we can actually have programs through all of our businesses that are involved to put a little bit of their money into those young children. That'll make a difference for our future.
Thank you. Admiral, teamwork is such a critical part of success in the military. Can you just talk about what you've seen of how this plays out in your career?
Well, the military functions based on teamwork. From the first day you put a uniform on, it's drilled into your head that you are part of a team, and the other teammates depend upon you to perform your job to the fullest. If one of the team members falters, then the other members have to pick up the load. And in the military, it's a kind of dangerous place to work. So that could lead to injury or death. So it's very important that we know our roles, that we perform as part of this team, and we work together for a common objective. One of the things is that makes us respond instantaneously to situations that arise. And that was evident on 9/11 at the Pentagon. I was there that morning. I was there in the aftermath. And I witnessed firsthand people coming together, doing what needed to be done, not asking or standing around, but getting involved, working as a team to clean up the mess that had been made. If the response had not been instantaneous, there would have been a lot more lives lost that day. But we are trained in the military to react without thinking. Our training takes over, and we look and see what needs to be done, and we do it. So you can see it's very important that our recruits have the emotional and the social capabilities, the motivation and the dedication to take on a task, to complete it to its fullest. And that's being part of the team and completing things as part of the team. So I think that's kind of an extreme example, but it defines why it's so important that we find people to join the military that have these talents. And you can't take an 18-year-old and teach them that. And they can't learn that overnight. It has to start at a very early age. And it's a proven fact that through quality childcare and preschool programs, those people can be developed into productive citizens. And I don't think that I'm exaggerating when I say that our tomorrow's defense capabilities are actually being defined today in our preschool classrooms.
Thank you. One of the things that's really fascinating is that the military has spent enormous amount of money developing a very high quality early childhood system. And could you talk about that, of how they've been such a leader in this field?
Well, I think DOD is recognized to have a model of childcare and preschool education for the rest of the nation. There's over 200,000 children of service members engaged in preschool today. And, you know, there's some important things that the military defines for preschool, and I want to make sure that I tell you all of them, so I am going to rely on my note card here. But the preschool, the child care within DOD are operated by all the different services. They are not babysitting services. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of our civilian counterparts, that's what they get in child care and preschool, is babysitting services. In the Department of Defense, our programs are well defined, they're inspected, and they are held to a very, very high standard. One of the things that we're trying to develop is cognitive development, physical and emotional developments, and the skills to get along with other people, how to control your emotions, how to react in different situations, and the things that are so important to being part of a team and how to get along with others. These are things, again, that you can't teach overnight. The programs are highly flexible. You can find them in brick and mortar buildings, on military installations. You can find them being conducted in the homes of military personnel on base. You can also find them being conducted in the civilian community. Does it cost a lot of money to do this? Yes, it does, and it requires a lot of resources. But the Department of Defense is convinced that our military members can't perform to their fullest unless they know their children are being well taken care of. So we do that. The Department of Defense is also a big believer in the fact that in order to fill our ranks in the future, we have to start working with children at a very young age, and that's child care and preschool. And so we invest in those programs heavily. We support those programs, and I think that if you do a little bit of research and look into the requirements for those programs, we are a model that could be exported to other areas in the country.
Great. I mean, I visited one of the programs. I was so impressed. I would love to send my children. I mean, it really is they're just terrific programs. Can you talk a little bit more also? So we have the audience here, and what would you like folks to consider? How can they partner with us? What would you like everyone to do?
Well, I think that this is a really great forum, and it's wonderful to be among educational experts. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to let you know about some resources that are available for you. CSA and Mission Readiness have lots of reports that are on their website, free to anyone who is interested. We would like to partner with you. I use the information to talk to my local state representatives. I've talked to my governor, and it doesn't matter what side of the aisle the politicians are on. When you tell them that 71% of 18 to 24-year-olds are not qualified to join the military today, their eyes are opened. That's a startling statistic. And everyone I've talked to really wants to try and reverse that trend. They're eager to find out ways that they can help. And so I think if we partner together, we can reverse that trend. And we very much look forward to working with you in the future to do just that.
Thank you. Michael, what would you like to ask of the audience?
Well, I'm excited, first of all, for my panelists here. In the business world, we don't want you to see this guy.
Hey,
Nothing
that
personal,
about?
but yeah.
Nothing personal. But we love this in regards to the military and how having this as an alternative to not being able to afford the high price of college. But the two giveaways that I'd like to share is the fact that in the business world, we are totally committed to our opportunities to work with young people and young families. There's no way that we will be successful without giving that commitment in dollars to families across the United States. So I just definitely want to share that. I just want to share one quick story about myself. Going through kindergarten, incredible time of my life, but I went twice, and it's okay to say no. And so with all the experts here and with all the love that you have in your heart, we in the business world do understand that we are obligated to depend upon you. And we're asking you to come on board. And as we support each other, the critical thinking, the communication, and the collaboration is key.
Great. Chief, what would you, how can we partner? What would you like to say to the audience?
well, we got like 25 minutes left, so I'm going to be long-winded if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, we all need to get involved. I mean, I think the problem in our country is that people are asleep at the wheel. We need an awakening in our nation to what's going on. When you look at the fact that you know, 7 out of, again, 10 kids that are prison inmates didn't graduate from high school. You look at the funding streams in this country. If you look at what's happening in this state, where Austin ISD is losing about 100 million. I don't know what the dollar is, but it's tens of millions of dollars that we or you all in the city of Austin or in Houston is now losing all this money. We're not funding education. And not only are we not funding pre-K education, we're not funding K-12. We're not funding education. And let me tell you, from a national security perspective, economic vibrancy perspective, and a public safety perspective, the rest of the world is caught up. The China has got more supercomputers. They're outperforming us with every measure you can think about, every economic measure, and pretty soon they'll start outperforming us from a military standpoint if we're not careful. And the only way we can combat that is through education. So we've got to weigh in. We've got the resources here. You've got generals, you have police chiefs, you have admirals, you have clergy, you have business people, coaches and athletes, all ready to help you and use us as a resource. But more importantly, we've got to weigh in. We have to weigh in. We can't just talk about this. We've got to demand action from elected officials. We have to demand as part of their platform that the public education piece has to be part of their platform, because it all starts with education for everything. And last, let me just say this about, if we know that all these kids, because they're not learning impulse control and emotional intelligence and the skills that they need early on, either in the home or through a quality education, we need to start treating adolescent behavior as adolescent behavior. When I was a young kid, you know, a guy named Richard Quintero. Richard, you're listening, I forgive you. Mentioned my mother. Now, you know, when you mention a little Cuban, their mother, and you use their mother's name in vain, you're going to get popped in the mouth. So he got popped in the mouth. And then we fought, you know, the fist fight at the, well, what's happened since my childhood is today that same punch isn't treated as adolescent behavior. That same punch in too many schools in this country is treated as criminal behavior. And so that starts the prison, the school to prison pipeline. And so I think that I'm going to challenge the educators. Your police officers, and there should only be there for one thing only, safety. It's not to take the place of administrators. It's not to take the place of teachers and counselors. And most certainly the criminal justice system is not to take the place of counseling. We need to give kids their tools. When they have that meltdown, we need to treat it as adolescent behavior. But the most important piece, again, is that we all need to start demanding that elected officials invest more today in education so we can free up a lot of dollars in the back end tomorrow for other needs like public roads and infrastructure and all the other needs. Because I'm afraid that if we don't stem this flow of dropouts and we don't stem the flow of young people failing and ending up in the prison pipeline, this world power that's lasted for over 240 years, whatever it's been, will not remain a world power in our lifetime, but most certainly in the lifetime of my children and my children's children.
Great. Well, let me ask one more question, then we'll turn to questions from the audience. Chief, I'm curious, you serve on our board, which I'm very grateful for, and you've been involved in many advocacy things. Is there one example of something that you've been involved in that you felt like you were able to make a real difference when using your voice as a police chief? Anything that comes to mind?
Well, it's interesting because I've been called controversial by the media, and I really believe as a person of faith that God put you in this position. You need to do something with it. And I think that when you're in a position that if you don't find yourself in controversy, then I question what you stand for, because the truth of the matter is you probably stand for not much. And I'm proud of the fact that there's two areas that we've worked really diligently in, and I have as a chief and my colleagues, and that is, again, funding for education. And when you have to fight your own boss here in Austin, because, sometimes it can get emotional. When Governor Abbott wanted to put into, I think, $118 million 2 sessions ago, was not last session, the session before, the extreme of a political, if you look at the political spectrum, right, there's the extreme left and the extreme right, and they both have something in common. They're both extreme, right? And most Americans are pragmatic. We're kind of, give and take. That's what our nation's been built on, and we're all being held hostage by the extremes. And all they care about, elected officials, is the next election, and I call it political theater and primary politics, right? That's all they care about. If I can get to my primary, I don't have to worry about the general. So, I had to fight to write an op-ed piece to get that funding, because he was being told, shame on you, this is welfare, by the extreme right. And my response to that is, guilty as charged. It is welfare. It's the welfare of children. It's the welfare of the next generation. It's the welfare of the elderly and people like us that we're going to have to rely on this set of young Americans, right? That without them, we're in trouble. And then the other piece is the dreamers, and I might as well just throw that out. We've got a lot of dreamers here that were brought to this country that they didn't get a choice in that. They're educated. One of the kids that I talk about is graduated number 2 out of Travis High School here. He was one of my explorers. Graduated Thomas from UT. That's what we need to focus on, is educating kids. And so I'm proud of weighing in on behalf of those that, without a little extra help, are going to end up being statistics. And I'm glad to say that we actually, it wasn't enough money as far as I'm concerned, but it was $118 million that by law enforcement weighing in, because it was on the verge of actually being killed. We were able to help the governor get that funding through, and I'm proud of that.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Dad. I think he started it back there. I'm kidding.
Michael, anything you want to share quickly before we turn to the audience about something you've been involved in with this work and with policymakers?
Well, most incredible thing is, as a member of this wonderful panel and a member of Council for Strong America, I just like to share that the most thing that we want to make sure we continue is creativity. 2018 and above, we need our kids to look past high school, to look forward to college, to understand, to be actively involved in science, technology, engineering, and math. That's the wave of the future. It's not about being a professional athlete. That was great for me. But I grew 6 inches from high school to college, and man, I was a beast. But you learn your habits early in life. You understand that knowledge is the basis of your triangle of life. You have the desire to want to be the best and stay the best. And you need to have the skills that will take you to the next level. That's what I call pre-K. That's what I call kindergarten. That's what I call, with one of my favorite poems, Rock Folklore said, everything we learned in kindergarten. So I just like to share that. I know as a business person and working for a large insurance industry, I manage people's risk every day. I have people calling me up, sharing with me the stories involved bad medical situations. I counsel them on how they should be able to take care of it prior to the event occurring. I talk to people about after tragic car accidents and what we need to do to make sure that these policies and things are taken care of. But more importantly, I talk to people about life. And that's what it's all about. But if I got the kids early on, when I didn't have to worry about the issues we talked about in regards to obesity, not having involved an ample physical educational program, or if I'm talking to them about not being able to eat at school, it's all comes to nothing. The business world is about looking at our young people. It's about working with the people here in the audience, and especially this conference, because there's nowhere that I've had an opportunity to see how technology is being embraced, how science is being looked at, how engineering can be a place, but it has to start early, and about the ability to know the numbers before you get to school. 18 months is tough when you're behind an 8-ball going into elementary school. I turned out okay. Okay to be held back. But more importantly, it's okay that you know that we at the Council for Strong America have some ideas and we're willing to work, not in front of you, but alongside you.
Great, thank you. Admiral, I know you've met with the governor in Illinois. You've done many things. Anything that come to your mind before we turn to questions?
Well, I think it's important, like the chief said, you know, our adversaries are investing in their youth. And if we want to remain competitive in the world stage, we also must make that investment. And I believe that in Illinois, we have made some real progress in educating our politicians on the status of our youth today and how we can improve that. And they're all very willing to listen and to try to work with us to increase the funding for childcare, for preschool, to keep physical fitness requirements in school, and also to look at healthy meal programs. So I think when you're armed with the right evidence and the reports, you can make a lot of progress by just having an open conversation with someone, because these statistics aren't well known, and it's up to us to spread the word to make things better for our children of today and tomorrow.
Thank you. So you've heard from these unexpected messengers about how early childhood can make such a difference in building a strong nation, and some ideas on ways we might partner. What I would love to do is, and you've also heard about our Citizen Readiness Index, and we hope it may be useful to all of you as really a barometer of how young people are doing. Would love to turn to some questions. You can either do it through Slido or the old-fashioned way, just raise your hand. Why don't we take a few, and then we can, because we have a good amount of time. So I have one here from Slido. Anybody?
She's asking about, you know, we're talking about pre-K education and educating kids, but parenting skills, you know, there's no manual. I mean, you all remember when you had your first kid, you got that book, and everything, something happened with the baby, you and your wife and your partner would be on there looking, what do we do? What do we do? With parenting, and that's something that we work on, so that's
absolutely
great.
And we got two questions here from Slido. So one is education. Can you see it up there? Oh, yes, okay. So the education starts at birth, but most young children don't have access to quality childcare. How can police departments and companies support the care needs of employees? And then second, when working with state decision makers on early childhood initiatives, how can we ensure that the intent of programs don't get lost in bureaucracies when implemented? We have four really good questions. Panelists, which one would you like to take?
The anonymous one, education starts at birth, but most young children don't have access to quality child care. How can the police department and companies support the care needs of employees? I like to talk about the company support. Across the nation, we have some incredible organizations that are already involved with confirming for all employees that they have a specific number of months and years off. I mean, that's number one. but we have to encourage people to use them. But more importantly, it's times where people just cannot take the time off. And what do? Childcare is extremely expensive, especially quality childcare. But again, every moment with your child will make a difference in regards to them gaining the habits that they will have for the entire length of their life. I think quality childcare is something that we have to really look at and invest more money in. But at the same time, parents and families have to understand that it is truly expensive. And I think it's something that we all need to look at, and there's organizations here at the conference that have some solutions. And I think we should all partner and collaborate and bring them forth for all of us.
Great. To me, I'm looking at number 20, working with state decision makers on early childhood education initiatives. How can we ensure that the intent of the programs doesn't get lost in bureaucracies when implemented? I think it's really important that when we fund programs, that education expenses need to be in the classroom, spent on the educators and on those receiving the education. We don't need, this is my perspective, so administrators don't beat me up. I'm not an expert on that part, but it's kind of like when I took over the Houston Police Department. I didn't need a bunch of chiefs sitting on the 16th floor. I need police officers in the community, crime fighting and community policing. The same thing with education. I think that we have to make sure that as we get these dollars, that they go to put kids through programs and to provide programming, and not necessarily a big bureaucracy where 30% of the dollars are going to administration instead of to the classroom. So one of the things that I would recommend to the legislators is that as they provide this funding, that's kind of like when you go do your yearly campaign for charitable contributions. I always look for charities that at least 90%, 85%, 90%, as close to the 100% of the dollars go to direct programs is who I support, not those that sometimes spend way too much on things other than what the dollars are meant for. So I think that from my perspective that there should be some type of parameters in terms of where the dollars go.
I'd like to comment on the parenting issue. I think that's very important. And I've already talked about the DOD child care and preschool programs, but we also have a parenting program in the department, and we do provide assistance. We have young 18-year-olds that join the ranks, that get married, that have children. They don't know how to go to the grocery store. They don't know how to balance a checkbook. They don't know the basics of running a household. So we do have programs where we do training, we do home visits, and I think that's very important. And I think all communities should try and allocate some resources to those, because you can spend a lot of money on a child, but 1 hour at home can ruin several hours in the classroom. And so it needs to be a joint effort to make sure that our parents are supporting the quality education that the child is getting.
We were really thrilled. We worked as an organization with Congress on the federal MIC-V program, the Maternal Infant Children's Health Program, and we were able to get it continued for another 5 years by working with many allies. So I think that's an important step forward. I think the gentleman also was asking over here, Chief, I'm wondering if you want to take this one about, so we're spending so much on the back end. How do we do more on the front end so that the money's in the right place? And do you have some thoughts?
And I think people have to weigh in. Look, the one thing that people that are in elected office care about most is the next election. And unless we create an environment, a political environment, where the elected officials believe there are consequences in terms of not supporting public education, it's not going to be a priority. I think that the squeaky wheel in government is what gets greased. All of us, and you can't look at this as, well, my kids are out of school. I would raise my family. Well, you're going to meet these young people, and my question is, do you want to meet them at the end of a gun when they come to rob you? Or do you want them at the end of a telephone when they're actually employed? We have a vested interest, all of us, in actually the success of young people we may never know. I think it was Hillary Clinton, someone said it takes a village. She was absolutely right. It does take a village. And it's time for the members of this village we call the United States to weigh in. You got to be loud. You got to be proud. You got to stay consistent. You can't take no for an answer, and you got to keep putting it in their face, because those that work against these type of issues, they're loud, they're consistent, they don't stop, and neither can we, because every child that we save from going down that path of failure, going down that path of imprisonment, is one less opportunity for us to end up being the victim of the crime, or for us to not be able to have the social services we need as we age in this aging population, because there's no tax base, or our freedoms, I really believe, and our way of life, I really believe, are at risk, because the rest of the world, including our enemies, are coming after us harder than they ever. People don't realize we're at war right now, right? They don't see bullets going on. They don't see rockets going off, bombs going off. We are at war right now as a nation, and the battles start in our own neighborhoods, in our classrooms, and ultimately in our education system. That's going to be the difference between the continuation of this great experiments or the end of an era, and I think in American history.
Excellent. So you've been nominated to run for office by one of these questions. I just want you to know.
Oh God, no, thank you very much.
So the one question here I think is a really interesting one. Maybe we can start with that. So how do you get decision makers in your respective organizations to prioritize, fund early childhood development? What are some examples of your success in changing minds?
Well, again, I mean, 2 sessions ago, I mean, it was the governor was getting beat up. They were going to hold the entire session hostage. It was his #1 priority, and the lieutenant governor wasn't all that interested, and it was going sideways. We were really worried about losing that $118, $120 million in funding, and we circled the wagon. Law enforcement weighed in, generals weighed in, admirals weighed in. Everybody started weighing in, and again, if you don't make noise, shame on you, because it is going to have an impact on you, and people need to know that. And if we can do that here in Texas, we can do it across this entire country. We need to do it one locality at a time, one state at a time, one session at a time, but we need to do it every time. It cannot be a one and out. They need to know that we're watching. They need to know that it matters to us, and they need to know that we are all going to start exercising our right to vote them out of office if they don't make young people and education a priority.
So in that example, so you did press conferences, your colleagues in law enforcement met with key policymakers, did op-eds. We had some of our admirals and generals here in Texas weigh in. So it was a whole, and working with allies. So it was a whole big, and
we testified to the legislature. No, we didn't win. Our children won. Okay, it's about the kids. That's what people don't get. This is, you know what? The way we treat children, women, and the elderly says a lot about society. And I want to, the day that I die, I want to be said that law enforcement, this generation of law enforcement leader, was on the right side of history. That's why we're weighing in on these matters, whether it's education or the dreamers or gun violence, because we're in these positions to be able to weigh in. They all impact public safety. They all impact national security. They all impact economic vibrancy. And all those three of those areas impact everyone in this room, everyone that's listening, and everyone that will watch us in the future.
Awesome. I know we are just seconds left. Thank you, everyone, for coming here. Please thank the panelists. We really appreciate your time. Thank you, audience, for being here.